Thank you. That was incredible, and actually makes some of my questions totally irrelevant. But I'm going to ask them anyway. I'm going to plow forward like a good politician. So, your reporting is amazing and really unsettling. So I was really happy that you ended on such an optimistic tone. And I want to end on that too, but I also want to go back and talk about a couple other things. Parts. Right, yeah. So, so first, I want to talk about AGI.
My favorite topic.
I know I can't ask you your PDUM. I'm not supposed to. Okay. So I used to work in arms control, specifically nuclear nonproliferation, and back then it was, it's pretty clear that the threat of, the Soviet Union basically that provided an amazing cover for empire building on both sides, and it seems like it's a very appropriate analogy to what we're going through right now with AI scaling, using AGI, and the need to be the first there. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm, Maybe you could comment on that comparison.
Yeah. I guess we could first start with what AGI is. So AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence, completely lacks a definition as a term, and therefore has extremely high utility as a rhetorical device. The reason why it lacks a definition is because generally it's understood as like an AI system that will match human intelligence one day. Like in theory, we can get there, except that we don't have scientific consensus around what human intelligence is. And in fact, like the history of trying to quantify and rank human intelligence has never been because of positive motives. It's always been like a really bad enterprise driving that pursuit. And so all the way up to today, these companies have convinced us somehow that they are definitely going to build AGI and it's coming, and yet they use completely different definitions for what AGI is depending on the moment. OpenAI, to my count, has used 4 different definitions. So officially on their website, they say highly autonomous systems that outperform humans in most economically valuable work. So it's an economics definition, which is of course very useful when you're trying to sell this technology to businesses, being like, I have an economically valuable tool for you that can replace all your workers, so pay me lots of money. But when they talk to consumers, they sell AGI as the digital assistant that you've always wanted. When they talk to Congress, it's going to cure cancer and solve climate change. And when they talk to Microsoft, they put in the contract that AGI is a system that will generate $100 billion of revenue. These are fundamentally incoherent definitions. That makes no sense. So essentially, AGI is just like whatever these companies want it to be. And in this empire building narrative, you're absolutely right. Like AGI then becomes the reason why they have to be engaged in this reckless expansion, because apparently when we get to AGI, we're either going to be in utopia or we're going to be in dystopia, but it all depends on who is getting to AGI first. And of course, if Sam Altman and Dario Amodei get there first, we're going to be in profound utopia and everything's going to be fine. And that's why they need to consolidate all of these resources. But yeah, it's a fiction, right? Like, how can you assign so many characteristics to a goal that has no goalposts? Like it doesn't really make any sense. But the companies have been just so effective in using this as a marketing tool to just, at this point, to provide cover for consolidating trillions of dollars of capital, like land all around the world, to get their hands into critical infrastructure, to insert themselves into the national security stack with the military. Like, this has been the most effective rhetorical device that Silicon Valley has ever had.
And it's a big misdirection, really, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it occurs to me that a system doesn't need to be super intelligent to be really harmful. That's kind of what you've shown us is some of the deep harms. And also, when new technologies emerge, there's often a lot of misunderstanding about the unintended consequences of those. So is it naive to think that some of these harms will be figured out as the technology gets deployed in a different way, just like some of the other breakthroughs in the past? Yeah.
I think it is, yeah, so this is like a common argument that the companies make. When we get to AGI will figure out how to solve all the problems that we wreaked havoc, like the havoc that we wreaked along the way. And one problem with this argument is that, like, not everyone has the luxury to wait it out. Of course, the people that are running this whole empire building project, they have the bunkers and they're all set. Like, if the planet goes to demise, they're gonna be fine, right? But the climate crisis is already upon us, and there's so many people around the world that do not have, like, this is already existential to them, what is happening right now. And so that's one problem with the argument, is like, who actually gets the luxury of waiting for this destination that might never come? But then the second part of it is like, to what degree are we going to keep allowing them to dangle this carrot before we realize that there's actually no carrot? And like, shouldn't we be focusing our energies on solving the harms now, so that as these systems continue to develop, the harms are already mitigated? You know, it's just like, it's kind of like the process seems flipped in their minds. Like, we're gonna first just burn through everything to build the thing, and then maybe, hopefully, the thing will fix everything. But like, why don't we just not burn through everything? Like, it's kind of, yeah, like, why?
So, but in the empire context, that happened at a different scale with railroads, with electricity, with telecommunications. You know, when those platforms were first created, they were created also in the kind of in the context of the empire, because there was this dominance for the few companies that had this technology and you know, were unevenly distributing it across society, right? And then innovation and competitiveness and so forth. You know, we're a business school, right? So we think it's possible that this might all be worked out by innovation and the emergence of competitors who, say, like the examples you gave, who are doing something really important and really powerful, but they're not hyperscalers, and they're not, you know, perpetuating abuses on the climate or on society. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I feel like I'm not trying to argue with you over your point. I'm just trying to understand it completely.
Yeah, I mean, so like some of the examples that you're giving are like, compared to what's happening today, is just like a fundamentally different scale. You know, like when the railroads were being built, like it expands at the pace of like physical infrastructure, and right now we're talking about the pace of digital infrastructure. Of course, there's a lot of physical infrastructure involved as well in building this. But it's just like a different speed, and it's like happening all around the world simultaneously, rather than like in certain pockets and then kind of radiating out. In terms of like, it's sometimes hard to explain like the sheer scale of what we're talking about, but the amount of capital that is being deployed right now to build the physical infrastructure for supporting this makes it the most expensive infrastructure project in human history. So this is more capital than was ever spent to bring the first man to the moon for the Apollo program. And the data centers that they're building, like I showed that, the comparison between Meta's first data center and its supercomputer now. I mean, in the past, there were more and more data centers being laid, but in the US, for example, energy demand flatlined over the last decade, even as there were more data centers being laid. And it was because of the innovation. The pace at which data centers was expanding was roughly equal to the pace at which data centers were also improving in their efficiency. The speed at which these companies are moving now has outpaced innovation. So we are seeing a historic rise in energy demand in the US, almost exclusively because of data centers. They also make this argument that, you know, like, we're gonna figure out modular nuclear reactors and then everything will be fine because we will no longer need fossil fuel-based energy sources. It's gonna be like abundant, cheap, clean energy. And yet again, it's like you're outpacing the ability to do that. And so instead of just slowing down their expansion, what they're now doing is trying to unwind nuclear regulation around the world to make them able to build these modular nuclear reactors faster. Like, it's like so upside down the way that they're going about it. And that's just going to lead to more harm from like the tertiary effects of them trying to do this quickly. So yeah, like it's just of a fund, like we are not moving at the speed of what we can innovate out of.
Right, so I completely agree with you about the scale, and I understand now, I think, how, that scale is different from past sort of platform disruptions, right? The internet came and opened up an incredible opportunity for innovation and entrepreneurs. Actually, many of the founders that you're critical of, came out of that era also. That, these are companies that only exist because of these earlier platform breakthroughs, like telecommunications and so forth. So I'm curious about your thoughts on how these hyperscalers have impacted the opportunity for other people to be innovators. I'm an entrepreneur turned entrepreneurship professor, so I kind of make it all about my interests. But can you talk a little bit about how these tech companies what kind of impact they've put on innovation in general, right? Because if you're just going to wait and rely on the AI to do the innovation for you at some point in the future, that seems like it stifles the motivation for people to do breakthrough research even.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, the AI industry is stifling breakthrough research in more ways than just simply saying that AI is going to do all the research for you. Like one of the things, and then I'll get to your question of like the earlier generation companies, but like just sticking with the current industry for a moment, one of the things that I talk about with the 4 parallels of empire, the third one, monopolizing knowledge production, like this is like a very undercovered aspect of the impact that the AI industry has had on innovation. In my book, I have this stat from a research paper that was produced by some MIT researchers published in Science, looking at how many graduate PhD students from computer science departments used to stay within academia and move to industry versus like back in the day versus now. In 2018, it was like 23% of PhD students would move to industry, and now it's over 70%. And so this is like, that is how they're stifling breakthrough research, is that when I first started covering AI back in 2018, there was such a tremendous diversity of ideas about how to develop AI. I mean, I was writing about papers where people were figuring out how to train models with teeny tiny amounts of data, or to train models on a mobile device, let alone like a giant supercomputer. And all of that kind of research has just disappeared, in part because there's no funding going to that research anymore, but also in part because all of the researchers that are now working for the corporate agenda aren't even being, like, they don't even think in this frame of mind anymore. And so there's been a dramatic narrowing of the kinds of AI research and innovation that's being done. And of course, not just AI innovation, as I mentioned, that the amount of funding that's going into AI is also just taking funding away from all other types of innovation. I think with the earlier generation of companies, there was a time when the platforms that they were developing were more enabling than they were extractive. There's this book that just came out from Tim Wu called The Age of Extraction that talks about this, how originally, the idea of platforms is that they can actually provide more opportunities to everyone by connecting people to the resources that they need. And what happened was that then the tech platforms, after operating like this for a while, realized that platforms are also a very unique kind of monopoly, where once you have enough of a network effect, you can really lock in the people to your platform and start squeezing them instead. And you can squeeze them more and more and more and more, and it takes a lot for them to leave the platform because they want access to the network. And so what Tim Wu argues is that once the extraction started happening, that's when innovation started really being more constrained. And we see this with, startups, entrepreneurs, that they start startups not to ultimately create companies, they start them to get acquired. So the entire entrepreneurship ecosystem is also like orienting themselves to building things that these companies need, rather than what consumers need. So it has like in both senses, both the AI industry and also when the same exact companies were, just doing non-AI things, both of them have had sort of monopolistic effects that have distorted the landscape of innovation to only serve their interests and their business needs.
So I don't think it's a coincidence that the current leadership in OpenAI actually traces their origin story back to being a startup founder, going through Y Combinator, sort of the very first startup accelerator. I've noticed a sort of fake it till you make it type of culture in accelerators and entrepreneurship ecosystems like that. And I wonder if there's a thread that goes all the way from that initial experience of sort of the pressure to signal quality in your progress as an entrepreneur, from Sam Altman all the way through to last week, announcing I think the largest venture funding round in history, and actually there's no dollars committed in that. It's $115 billion of commitment, but there's absolutely no. If you look at it, there aren't any dollars that are changing hands. So I wonder if you could talk about this sort of fake it till you make it dynamic. Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, no, I think it's such a crucial part of understanding the culture of the entrepreneurship space in Silicon Valley specifically. My brush with this was when I was an undergraduate researcher at the MIT Media Lab. And the MIT Media Lab is also famous/infamous for really encouraging all of its labs to be to operate like a Silicon Valley startup. And at the time, when Silicon Valley had more of a sheen to it, this was considered like a really innovative approach for running the lab. But I was part of a lab where we did a lot of faking it to try to make it. And there was no, and it was considered, it was never considered a bad thing. It was considered an essential skill for surviving as an entrepreneur, to have a grand vision and paint that vision and say it so convincingly that it manifests, right? And people would say, oh, it's in the tradition of Steve Jobs. He would his reality distortion vision, he would say things that were not true so convincingly that they would become true. And this is the key skill that you must learn as an entrepreneur before anything else. That was how people would talk about it, is this will be the differentiator between the people that make it and the people that don't, the ones that can tell the stories in the most persuasive manner. And absolutely, that is Sam Altman's skill too. He is a phenomenal storyteller. He is able to paint such extraordinary visions to people that make them want to commit capital, even if they're not necessarily wiring it to him right away. And also to jump ship from whatever thing they're doing to join his. But yeah, we are in now a multi-trillion-dollar fake it till you make it scheme. And if it was just these people, like the Sam Altmans of the world, that would have to deal with the consequences when it all comes falling down, then, I wouldn't be so critical and be okay, you reap what you sow. But that's not what's happening, right? They're going to be fine, and everyone else is not going to be.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to say. So I wanted, we have 15 minutes left, and I wanted to, bring some optimism back into the thing, if we can, if it's possible.
I love optimism. I am an optimist. I wouldn't be doing this work if I wasn't optimistic.
So let's start there then. So, we have this breakthrough with AI. It's transformational. It's not going away. What are you optimistic about that? Do you wish it didn't happen?
No, I mean, it goes back to what kind of AI are we actually talking about? I don't think anything is ever inevitable. I do not like the phrase "it's not going away," because what's not going away? Is the problems are not going away? The technology in its current form that's not going away? What specifically are we talking about? And I don't think, when it comes to this particular approach to scaling AI, I think it should go away. We should just stop scaling, and it's absolutely possible to get there. In fact, I was talking about how we need to resist the empire. The data center protests are actually having a serious effect now on these companies, where they're having like internal meetings where they are trying to strategize how to get around this massive political issue where they can't build data centers as fast as they want to scale their technologies anymore. So like absolutely could go away if we all have the vision and the conviction to do that. But what I am optimistic about is the types of AI technologies that we can imagine and build instead. Because I do believe that there are types of AI technologies like what I described with the Tahiko Media case that can really help people, communities, businesses. But like, I feel like Silicon Valley has sort of gotten us to this place where we've forgotten what it's like to have a normal company that's not an empire. Like the goal is not to make these companies go away. The goal is to make them stop being empires. Like we can just have normal businesses, please and thank you. Like businesses that actually provide a fair exchange of value to their consumers and to their workers. Like not, instead of just exploiting, extracting, and milking as much out of every single person that they touch in the world. And so, yeah, like I'm optimistic about the fact that we're going to get there. We're going to finally get these empires to just be normal companies. And we are going to have radically new types of AI that really do actually transform things in the ways that Silicon Valley promises us, but they're like they're building rockets while they're selling the benefits of the bicycles. Like, let's actually just build the bicycles.
Yeah, so that's optimistic. And so I wanted to talk about, I told you I'm gonna end on the optimistic tone. I'm gonna get there. So a lot of the people in the room here are educators, and there's a lot of students here, obviously. So, these are educators that deeply care about preparing their students for life, for their career. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about like advice for the educators, and then the backup question, or the second part of it, was advice for the students. So it's really two questions snuck in there. So the first question is, what would you tell the educators here what would you want to tell them that they should be doing, tomorrow in class or next quarter in class to help prepare their students? Because I think we've really leaned into AI as an important tool for learning, but we might be doing it, ignorant to the problems that you're talking about that are in the background. Like we're not thinking about the forests that are burning down because of the data center that we're lighting up.
Yeah. One of the things that I would really, really strongly encourage educators to do is not force your students to use AI. Like I've met so many students on my book tour that lament how they are being required to use these tools and they feel really bad about it. And some students love it, but like give students a choice and like help them navigate whether or not they want to use the tool and how they use the tool, and also which tool that they use, because ultimately, like a huge part of my work, the theme is really democracy and agency, like giving people agency. And the more that we buy into these narratives that you must do this, otherwise you're going to be automated away, or like AI is not going away, so you have to partake in it, the more that you actually erode away your students' agency. Like the best thing that you can do for them is to continue giving them this sense that they are individuals with choice and that they can like critically think about whether or not they want to be using this tool or not. And also frame like the use of these tools in relation to their goals. Like what are the goals that they ultimately want to achieve, and then help them work backwards and think, is AI actually going to help you achieve that goal? Because if it's not, then, they'll be perfectly fine if they don't use it. Like I actually don't use any of these generative AI tools. And the reason is because I feel that my work is unique because of my ability to engage and relate with people, and therefore cultivate like really great sources that I can interview, and also to be able to tell stories in my writing that resonate with a broad audience. And neither of these two things are strengths of AI. So it's not like, I don't use AI in part for a moral stance because I've investigated these companies for long enough that I don't want to deal with it. Also for privacy reasons, like I'm never gonna use ChatGPT and be like, hi, I'm an investigative journalist that's investigating OpenAI. But also, it's like, I don't suffer any costs from it as well because my goals are just like totally perpendicular to what AI offers. So yeah, I would start there, like just like emphasize to them. I mean, because all educators ultimately that is like the work that all of you do is just helping your students figure out what their goals are and then figure out how to get there. And AI should just be one tool in the toolbox that is open to them as an option. Also, like teaching them to think critically about like which AI tool to use. Not all AI tools are created equal. Of course, I've already talked about the transportation example, but also like when it comes to different types of chatbots, like different companies are also not created equal. Maybe consider using open source models instead of the closed source ones. And maybe even having a class discussion about it at the beginning of the semester so that like everyone can talk collectively about what do you want the AI policy for this class to be, like have a bit of like a democratic governance session. I was just in LA yesterday and I spoke at Santiago Canyon College in the morning, and I challenged them to start a hackathon to build some new AI tools that can be used in the classroom using some open source models. And the professor emailed me this morning and was like, hackathon already started. So I now challenge this community. You should also start a hackathon and start dreaming up some bicycles of AI using the open source models that are available. See what you can build that gets you out of the mindset of getting locked into just using the off-the-shelf tools from OpenAI or Anthropic. And I guess, I mean, basically my advice is exactly the same for the students, is like, just think about, like what do you ultimately want to achieve and how is AI going to fit or not fit into it? And if your teacher starts foisting AI on you, rally your students together and protest collective action and collective resistance.
I think we should stop there because I might just drag us back down. I have one question that I want to ask that I always tell my students to ask when they're out talking to potential customers for their startups, which is, what question should I have asked you?
I don't know. Is there any questions that people have felt that I have not answered yet that's on people's minds?
So we did have questions crowdsourced, and I have the list here. Many of them you answered in your presentation or through, so I didn't really draw any out, but maybe I can just look at this list. Yeah, well, here's one. So with the accelerated impact of AI on our lives, how do you envision our society and the world in 25 years? We can end on that. It's got to be a utopia.
Okay, so first, I do not do predictions because I believe that predictions are, once again, undermining people's agency. We don't predict the future, we make the future. And so the future that I want to see in 25 years, and I hope we all work together to make it, is one where, regardless of whether we're talking about AI or other types of technologies, we are always remembering that the fundamental goals that we collectively have as a society, which is that every single individual in this world deserves an opportunity to have a dignified, fulfilled life. And whatever we need to do to get there, with or without technology, with some technologies, without other technologies, we should be doing. And we should always orient ourselves towards that North Star and get there in 25 years.
Thank you. Karen Hao.